mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 2, Episodes 1 through 4 of HBO's Industry. So the reason I'm doing this, I'm a little bit late on this one, but I've enjoyed this show. I've binged all of Season 1. There's a video on the Patreon. For those of you who might be interested in my thoughts on Season 1, there's a video on the Patreon where I do talk about it briefly, but watching Season 1, I binged it really fast. I got caught up on Season 2 pretty quickly. And this is a show that I enjoy to the point where even though we're halfway through the season, I felt like it needed its presence felt on this channel. And I'm like, I would be doing it a disservice because, I plan on doing a best of 2022 early next year. And it's not fair to me to like something this much and not have it be present on the channel. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to do this quick, not really a recap, but give my thoughts on the first 4 episodes overall. I'm going to tackle it from a character perspective, like here's what's going on with this character, here's what's going on with this character, here's how I feel about it, etc. Then I'm going to do a couple things, and then I'm going to come right back, and I'm going to record a full, my normal full video for episode 5. I watched episode 5 last night. I've got my notes together, so I'm going to do my actual full normal review for episode 5, and then as also for 6, 7, and 8 going forward. So before I start, though, I want to again shout out my 2 new patrons, Delvin Cox and Factual. If you're interested, if you're a person who is just discovering my videos from the industry video, you might not be familiar with a lot of my other content. I encourage you to check it out. But there's a video in the feed from about a week and a half ago called Major Announcement. And that one has all the details on the Patreon. Like the link, obviously the link's going to be in the show notes as well. But the link, the breakdowns of the tiers, the pricing, all that good stuff, what you get. So please check that out if you are so inclined, especially if you're someone who's new to my videos and you're just like, oh, okay, I'm going to see what this guy has to say, this random fucking guy. What does he have to say about industry? If you are so inclined, feel free to hop on that Patreon, subscribe, all that good stuff. So, I explained why I wanted to talk about this show, so now I'm going to but I'm going to briefly kind of like talk about what each of the main characters has kind of dealt with in the first 4 episodes, and just kind of give my thoughts on that. So Harper ended last season throwing Daria under the bus in order to get Eric back at Pier Point. She also had a panic attack during her Rift Day like presentation, and she dipped out. And we see her opening this season, and the team is the team. I don't know. I make it feel like I'm like they're part of a crew. But Pier Point has essentially been off working from home, just like we were during COVID. And everyone's back in the office except Harper. And Harper, we see around this hotel. She's like swimming. She got this bathrobe. Seems like she's just kind of chilling, and she's working out of this hotel room. And I remember reading a review of episode 1 that seemed to kind of make it seem like it was coincidence that Harper comes across Jesse Bloom while staying at this hotel. I am under the impression that she was stalking him. Like she had some kind of tip or clue that he was staying at this hotel, and she was there for the purpose of kind of poaching Jesse. But that was just my interpretation. So she's been stalking Jesse in this hotel. Eventually, she ends up back at Pier Point, the actual offices, and nobody likes her. I mean, there's still all kinds of fallout from her behavior at the end of season 1. No one's really talking to her, really acknowledging her. Her and Yasmin are just not, they're not seeing eye to eye. That's an understatement, but they're not. I'm going to call her Yaz, by the way, for the rest of my industry coverage. Yasmin, and then they say like Yasmin sometimes, and I'm like, okay, I don't know if it's Yasmin, but everyone's cool with Yaz, so I'm going to stick with that one. So Eric wants Harper to come back into the office, and part of it is because the New York office is sending somebody over to kind of, I don't want to say spy on them, because you can't spy when it's very obvious and overt what you're doing, but he's there to essentially assess. And I think what my interpretation of it is that at first I thought the New York office was looking to absorb the London office. Now it kind of feels like it could go either way. Like after those first 4 episodes, I think my interpretation is that DVD is kind of out there to assess London, maybe build London up to where they are comparable to New York, which from his presence there, I'm guessing that they're not. And it could be a situation where either one, New York or London, could be absorbed. So, but in episode 1, my impression was that if they didn't get their act together in London, which DVD was out there to help them do, then they were going to get absorbed into the New York office. And that could still be the case, but that was my impression of what was going on there. So Harper gets to a fight with, I think this is still episode 1. She gets to a fight with Yas at Rishi's engagement dinner, and Robert takes care of her. He takes her home. He turns down her very aggressive sexual advances. And when she wakes up in the morning, she sees a note that says that the hotel life's not for her, and he offers her, he doesn't offer, he tells her that she will be staying in the spare room where him and Gus live at. Which, I just want to say, now after having viewed 5 episodes, I feel like we've been ripped off on seeing a Robert, Gus, Harper, I don't know, almost kind of like that would be an entertaining spinoff, like the Gus Harper Robert show. I feel like we've been kind of shortchanged here on getting some good moments, because I feel like on paper, if I knew going into season 2 that those 3 were going to live together, I'd be like, oh, that's going to make for some great scenes between those 3. And we have yet to get one. So just throwing that out there. So we also see Harper kind of like stalking someone on IG. There's this picture of a woman. She keeps going back to this picture. She clicks whoever it is that's tagged in the picture, and then she sends a DM saying like, Berlin, I know you're there. This person doesn't, I think initially they don't respond at all. Then at one point she sees them typing, but then they stop. And then at another point they say, you got me confused with somebody else. And as of the first 4 episodes, we don't know who this person is. We all have our suspicions. I believe we all have the same suspicion, but we don't know who this is. So she eventually does poach Jesse at this hotel, and it's a she comes at him pretty aggressively, and he essentially says, you got this. She says something about having a breakfast, which we know is supposed to be her meeting with Phelim and Eric, and he says something to the effect of like, why don't you skip that and come to this Q&A session that I'm having, which she does, and that ends up kind of starting to move the show in a direction that, while I have a little bit of not hesitance, but like I question it, I have faith in that the show is going to take it into a place that I find interesting. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit more, because now I feel like Harper's story prior to episode 5, after what I've already talked about, kind of it's intertwined with Eric and Jesse's story. I'm going to talk about Eric and Jesse a little bit later. So, and then I'll be talking about Harper even more when I get my video done for episode 5. So I'm going to move on to Robert right now. And I got to say, for Robert's one of my favorite characters on the show, because I looked at Robert starting the show as that he's going to be like that typical douchey, came from, silver spoon-fed white boy who's going to be super debonair, super arrogant, do all the drugs, get all the women. And watching him like debase himself for Yaz during season 1 was something that I didn't really expect. And he seems to be someone who's a lot more sensitive and a lot more nuanced than you would generally think somebody who looks like that would be. So starting season 2, I was curious where they were going to go with Robert, because I think it was kind of clear that Robert wasn't quite cut out for this job. And I think his season has started off really strong. And I'm going to talk a lot about Robert when I do my video for episode 5. But I like what I thought he'd be versus what he's become. And in season 2, we kind of start off with him grappling with the fact that he isn't cut out for the job. He isn't making really any cold calls. I can't remember who it was. It might have been DVD, but somebody calls him out on basically being good for nothing other than just, shining people up and being like the person who just makes the connections with people in person, but not really good at just like the nuts and bolts of the job. I think that happened after his that might have actually happened after his Rift Day thing in the season 1 finale. But we open season 2 and he's kind of dealing with that still. And he's not making any calls. He's not really doing anything. He's off the wagon. Not off the wagon, is the opposite. He's not, I don't think he's drinking. He's definitely not doing any more drugs. He seems to be treating women fairly respectfully. But like I said, we do start the season being reminded that he's not good at his job. But what he gets challenged by, again, I believe it was DVD, to call the least responsive account on their roster, whatever it is that you want to call it. And that gets the ball rolling for him. And he ends up talking to Nicole, who we remember from season 1. And I mean, we're not even going to talk about Nicole and Harper from season 1. I'm sure I talked about it in my on my Patreon video where I talked about season 1, but we know what Nicole's deal is. And I think it's interesting that not only does she like her behavior with Robert mirrors that of her behavior with Harper, but it's interesting that when Harper doesn't reciprocate and Robert does, things seem to go in a direction where this excites Robert. And we've seen Robert kind of get, not be able to really get it up, both like metaphorically and literally, without some sort of edge to the encounter. So we think about how Yaz treated him in season 1, and then we think about how Nicole's kind of treating him right now. And it's that he needs that kind of like extra level of excitement. Like Robert's not good with like regular fucking. Like he needs to have some extracurricular stuff going on. And we see once he finds out that this is kind of like Nicole's deal and that he's not special, I thought it was very interesting how hurt he seemed at the idea that she pulled the same thing with Harper. And like these are kind of the kind of like aspects of Robert that make him so much more three-dimensional and makes him so enjoyable. Like Robert's probably either my favorite character or like top 2, top 3, just because I feel like he's so complex and there's so much going on with him. And I think that this is gonna sound weird, but I think even Robert the character knows how he should be perceived. Like I'm the kind of guy who is gonna be looked at as this, but I'm something different and I want to showcase that, but everyone only sees me as this. And I think I think they're doing a great job of showcasing that in a way that's not very overt, where you see Robert like saying these things, verbalizing them, but you can read it in his actions. Like the face that he made when he found out that Nicole had done, made some moves on Harper. So really good stuff there, I think, what they're doing with Robert. Let's see. I'm going to pause on Robert for now. I think that's kind of good for 1 through 4. We get a lot with Robert in episode 5 that I'll talk about in that video. So I'm going to stop with Robert for now. So moving on to Yaz, we learned that Maxim is out, which means that she's losing one of her biggest clients. But she's at a party and Maxim introduces her to Celeste, who not only did Yaz think she was a sex worker, so did I. I thought that, but that's the brilliance of the show. We were meant to think that. And they gave us all the clues that she was. And just because of the nature of the show, the nature of the party, the nature of just who Yaz is and all this, we took that information and ignored any concept that like this might have been evidence that she's something other than a sex worker. We just like, sex worker, just looking at her and just through the nature of the show. And I think that it was smart of the show to kind of like use us like that. We know where they're going to go with this, so we're going to lean into it, and then we're going to pull the carpet out from everybody and say that not only is she not a sex worker, but she works at Pierpoint on a higher floor than Yaz in wealth management. So I feel like these first 4 episodes have kind of been like a real like heel turn for Yaz. Like she's been very unlikable. We get this new girl, I think her name was Venetia. She starts there as just like Yaz was in season 1, and Yaz treats this girl like shit because she's not so willing to do all of the things that Yaz was doing, the accepting that role that I'm the new person, I'm a woman, so I'm gonna be subservient to these male veterans. And Venetia comes in like, we don't live like that no more. Like, I'm not doing that because that doesn't make sense for me in my role. I'm not doing that because it's demeaning. And she shows a strength that Yaz lacks. And because of that, you can see that jealousy spark, that anger sparks. Yaz treats her even worse. She does the thing like, the get up and pitch an idea deal and then berates the girl to the point of tears. And it's just it's such a remedial way of thinking. It's such a remedial way to behave. Like, oh, this person is showing admirable qualities that I lack, so I'm just gonna shit on them. Like, what are you, 12? Like, yes, it's terrible in these moments. But we are now in the second half of the season taking the Yaz character in a different direction. So again, I'll mention that in episode 5, but there's some stuff to talk about there as well. So she also struggles in wealth management. She makes a lot of decisions that I think she's bringing her behavior from her normal job, which the name of her desk, FX, how she would behave on a business dinner in her normal job to how she should behave in the wealth management job. And I think she's also looking at Celeste and thinking like, still kind of leaning into the sex worker thing, like, we're here to provide both wealth management advice and sexual services. And it's not like that. It's all about this perception. And her bringing this into this new world isn't reflecting well on her. She's not doing very well in the wealth management field. She's doing a lot of things that are undermining Celeste, putting her in a tough spot. But there's an interesting scene when she comments on Celeste's shoes, and Celeste gives her the shoes, just like off her feet, like, here you go. And then we see her having sex with Maxim later, and she's climaxing, and the camera pulls to the shoes, and you see she's wearing the shoes. And I like the ambiguity of, is she orgasming from the sex and Maxim, or is she orgasming from the shoes and Celeste? And when we see the scene later where Celeste is doing Yaz the same way that Yaz did Robert, they dropped the dollar bill they were doing the coke with, and the way Celeste made Yaz pick it up, you can tell she's enjoying being in the same role that she was putting Robert in. So, like, we're gonna see where that goes. I think it'll probably go somewhere fairly interesting, but right now I feel like Yaz is a lot less complex and interesting in this season than she was in season 1. Because I like the idea of, like, I got something to prove. I'm new here. I'm highly touted. And now all I'm doing is picking up salads and picking up coffees and being just disrespected by Kenny. Not, she showed no, let me stop that sentence. My interest in her came from, how is she going to get past this? How is she going to prove herself, prove that she belongs here in a way that has nothing to do with her appearance or her sexuality? How is she going to stand up to these people and show that she belongs there as an employee of Pierpoint and not as just like the pretty girl who goes to get the salads? And that was interesting to me. And what she's been doing this year with this season, the stuff with, like I said, the way she treated the new girl, the stuff with wealth management and Celeste, and not quite it's interesting, but it's not as interesting as the stuff from season 1. We're also introduced to her father. He pops up, and she wants to manage his money through the wealth management area in Pierpoint, and she wants to bring that business to Celeste. And there's an interesting scene where he's meeting with Yaz and Celeste, and he's got on like biker shorts, and he gets up, you can see his dick print, and it's like, what is up with this guy? And we also see Yaz trying to manipulate him, because she's looking like, okay, this guy wants my affection, so I'm going to present myself as vulnerable, as childlike, and use that to kind of manipulate him to get what I want. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the idea that being childlike would appeal to her father in episode 5, when I talk about episode 5. So toward the end of the episode, we find out that maybe he's not doing all that great financially, and I think this is probably around the end of episode 4. We find out that he's essentially got a lot of NDAs out there and is paying a lot of loot to shut up women that I guess he had affairs with. So that's an interesting aspect as well. He says that they're still, I think he said like generations over worth of money. I don't know about you guys, but I don't believe that. I think they're probably in pretty bad shape, and Maxim implied that. So moving on, those are kind of the main spots that I wanted to live at up until I have one that I might spend a little bit of time on. But Gus, I haven't really liked the direction that they've taken Yaz. I can't even speak on the direction they're taking Gus because Gus hasn't appeared that much. But I will say Gus's storyline is not as compelling as it was in season 1 either. Gus was obnoxious, but I found his character and how he moved within this world to be interesting. Right now, he no longer works in Pierpoint after the events of the finale. We don't even see him in episode 1, aside from like a quick shot of him getting his hair colored. And then we see him in the next 3. He strikes up a relationship with Jesse's son, who he's supposed to be helping to get into Oxford. Why does everybody want to fuck Gus? I don't get it. He looks like Lil Wayne. Like, I don't understand. But Lil Wayne without Lil Wayne money. I don't know why people want to fuck him. And I think I said the same thing in my video for season 1. But then he decides to kind of take on politics. And he ends up working with this woman who we see at one of the retreats that Harper and Jesse and Phelim and Eric go to. And he starts to kind of work with her. And we could see that he's actually finding fulfillment in helping people. This guy comes in with this, what he said was dog shit that ended up being human shit. And Gus actually works to connect with this guy. And you can tell it's rewarding and fulfilling for him. And all that is great, but I don't know what direction this is going. And I find it a lot less interesting than I did with season 1. I have an inkling now after episode 5 of where this is going, because they are starting to now kind of bring Gus working with this politician. They're starting to bring that grouping back into the same world as Pierpoint, where we'll likely see Gus and Harper needing to kind of like work with each other. So I think he's gonna be a lot more present in these final 3. But this angle of like him like finding fulfillment in politics, it's like, okay, it's all right, but it's not as good as the season 1 stuff. Now we have a couple of new characters I want to talk about real quick before I wrap this one up. We have DVD, who I mentioned earlier. I'm not even going to try David Van Deneter or some shit. I don't know. But we're going to call him DVD just like everyone else does because it's a lot easier. He's the guy that was sent in by New York to kind of just monitor the way London is operating. Like I mentioned, I think he's going to have some sort of involvement in whether or not they potentially one location potentially absorbs the other. He's a former student of Eric. Eric is very clearly jealous of that fact now, that like someone that he brought up is now above him. DVD is disgustingly like nice, gentle, corny, and predictably him and Harper end up in a relationship. Not in a relationship, but you know what I mean. In a relationship with what you would call that in industry. If in a relationship means like nut on your stomach and eat ass, that's what that's what DVD and Harper are dealing with. But she says at one point to him that she doesn't believe that he could have gotten this far at Pierpoint being as nice as he is. And I still think we're gonna see. I think he's playing a long game here. I think we're going to see him get pretty dastardly. There's a point where he kind of like invites himself to this lunch meeting with Jesse and Harper. And I don't know. I'm starting to feel that too. The way he kind of pops up on this call with Eric, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit. I don't know. I don't trust him. But so far, they've got a little thing going on. Jesse. So Jesse's a new character. Jesse Bloom, I believe his name is. Like I said, he was being stalked by Harper at the beginning. He made a ton of money during the pandemic. And Harper essentially kind of wants to use him initially as kind of like a safety net if Eric can't work things out with Phelim. Eric seems to be the only person who believes that he can work things out with Phelim, but everyone else seems to be losing their faith in that. And there's the first great scene, I think, of this season, and I think it happens in I think it's episode 2. Harper, I think, shows up at work 15 minutes before open, and everyone is expecting Phelim to like call up and save the day. Well, no, actually, I take it back. Eric is expecting Phelim to call in and save the day. Everyone else is expecting that to not happen. The phone rings, it's Jesse, and then we have this great scene where, again, all the stuff they say makes no sense to me. But I understand the stakes and what needs to happen. And I understand that what needs to happen is this phone call with Jesse needs to go well, because if things don't work out with Phelim, they'll have Jesse in their back pocket too. So to even get the ball rolling on this, Harper needs to talk to Anna, and she tells Yaz to put her in touch with Anna. And that was great because that was a callback to earlier in the season where she asked the same thing and Yaz didn't do it. Yaz relents in this scene, and we get this whole kind of like back and forth where they're just kind of like haggling almost on what actions to take. And it's a really exciting scene where everyone is saying stuff that doesn't make sense, and it ends up being a big win for Harper, and everyone's clapping for her at the end, and it was a really intense scene. I absolutely loved it. Yeah, so she squares everything away with Jesse, and Rishi handles the transaction, and they're good to go. And in the next episode, they go to this retreat. Jesse shoots Phelim in the face by accident. Let's see. And then at the end of this retreat, Jesse links up with Anna via Harper, and now this effectively pushes Phelim out. And pushing Phelim out really pushes Eric out, because we established that Eric's really not doing any business outside of Phelim. And that essentially catapults Jesse to almost like a main character on the show, and kind of pushes Eric down, which I don't really approve of that, because Eric was probably the most interesting character in season 1. So to kind of like put him on the back burner a little bit this year is a questionable decision. But with 3 episodes left, I think given what we've seen with Eric, there's probably going to be some an explosive ending for him this season. But moving on to Eric real quick before I wrap up, he's now seemingly an outcast. He gets moved. He gets told that he's being promoted. It's a job where he's gonna makes more money, but has to be in the office less. But it is effectively a shelving, and their way of saying you ain't cut out for your former job anymore. And there's a great scene where he goes to New York to lean into the guy, what's his name, Bill something, the guy who's like in charge of Pierpoint or whatever, lean into this guy about DVD paying his team, and he goes there to throw DVD under the bus, like I want him out. And then we find out the DVD is actually on speakerphone and has heard all this, and that's when they tell him that he's been promoted, and he's really just being shuttered away. It was a sick scene. And then we also see him while he's there. He meets up with the widow of his former mentor, and she tries to actually put moves on him, and he rejects it. But after this situation, the one where he gets told that he's being promoted, we see him first going back home and kissing his kids in the bed, and then it flashes back to showing that essentially it looks like he cheated on his wife with his mentor's widow. So interesting stuff with Eric going on. So real quick, my thoughts. This season, great. Off to a great start. It's not quite on par with season 1, but there's still 3 episodes left. A whole lot can happen. This show does a great job of having these great scenes that are just intense, where you have no idea what is being said, but they've done a good enough job of building up the stakes and helping you understand in broad terms what needs to happen and the consequences of whether that happens or not, what the fallout will be. So it makes for these really great scenes. And I think they're doing a lot to make these characters a lot more 3-dimensional. When like starting the show, I'm thinking like, okay, this is just gonna be like people at a bank fucking all the time. And I've said that it's like Succession meets Euphoria, and it's a lot more Succession than it is Euphoria. And I think that's a good thing for this show. So I will be back very shortly to talk about episode 5, last night's episode. And until then, peace.